It seems that somebody had stole baby Jesus from the nativity scene in Daley Plaza. And so, after an anonymous tip, they were able to track down the thief. They charged him with a misdemeanor, and they returned baby Jesus to the manger. They took greater security measures to make sure that it never happened again. They put a chain and a padlock around baby Jesus to make sure that no one could take him from the manger. But in 2004, it happened again. A college student was able to slip baby Jesus out from under the chain and take off with him. He was later discovered 2.5 days later. The college student was arrested. Baby Jesus was returned to the nativity scene, and all was well. Now, there is a group of people that have been hired to guard baby Jesus, known as the God Squad. And their only goal, true story, their only goal is to make sure that baby Jesus never leaves the manger again. And isn't that our goal sometimes? We look at Jesus and we see him as that swaddled baby lying in the hay in the manger, and that's where we'd like to keep him. He's peaceful, right? We just left the Christmas season where we talk about peace and we talk about the Prince of Peace, and we send Christmas cards and we receive Christmas cards, and it's all about peace and all about the baby Jesus lying in the manger. And even if we portray Jesus as an adult, we see him as this man that has a beautiful complexion, almost a baby face. He's got beautiful blue eyes, long flowing auburn hair, pretty much a grown-up baby, right? And if we see him on the cross, often our images are very sterile. He's got a drop of blood on each hand, and maybe a drop of blood on his feet, and maybe a drop of blood coming out of his side, but that's about it. And I think it's safe to say that our portrayal of Jesus probably falls well short of who the real Jesus was. What's the one word that we commonly associate with Jesus? Well, peace, right? I mean, after all, he was the Prince of Peace. Do we remember what was written in Isaiah chapter 9, starting in verse 6? For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. What about John chapter 14 and verse 27? Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be fearful. And besides peace, what is the other word that is commonly used to signify who Jesus was? Well, it's love, right? I mean, that is an accurate description of who Jesus was. He was love. Just as God is love, Jesus was all about love. He was love incarnate. He was love and manifested in human form. And so we have peace, we have love. This Jesus embodies both of those things perfectly, right? I mean, in John 15, 12 through 14, he says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you." And remember, John chapter 13, starting in verse 34, he says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Okay, so Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He is the personification of love. So how do we reconcile all that with these words? Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his own household. How do we take all of this in light of what we already know about Jesus? The man who said, "Turn the other cheek, go the extra mile." The Prince of Peace. Did he misspeak here? Did Matthew record something in the life of Jesus that maybe he would rather have not Matthew recorded? Did Jesus have a slip of the tongue? Not exactly. Now, what Jesus says here is absolute fact. He meant every word of it. He chose his words wisely, and certainly he does here. The message that he is getting across is to be a disciple, to follow in his footsteps, to take up your cross, to be salt of the earth, to be light of the world will likely lead to you being an outsider. Rather than bringing peace, it may very well bring turmoil to your life. And it will almost certainly cause division. Probably within your own family, perhaps. Most of you know that I lived this. Those of you who know my story know that I came from a household where I was raised in a different religion. And when I made the decision to put on Christ in baptism at 24 years of age, I caused division in my family. And my mother, whom I loved up until the day she died, was my enemy spiritually. I thought she'd be proud of me. I thought she'd brag to all of her friends about, her son, the preacher, but instead, she was not happy. And there was a wedge that was driven between us, all because I chose to be a follower. This past October, I had the wonderful opportunity to sit in the audience and listen to a man by the name of Wissam Al-Afawi speak. Wissam is a Christian living in Dearborn, Michigan, preaching the gospel. But he grew up in Baghdad. And growing up in Baghdad, he saw the terrors of a government that didn't seem to care about the people. He saw war, he saw desolation, he saw people being killed, and he said, I don't believe in God. There is no God. He wasn't Muslim, he wasn't anything, although his family was dedicated to Islam. One day, he decided to go to the flea market to find some books maybe to pick up and read, and he found the Gospel of John. And so he picks up the Gospel of John just by itself. He takes it home and he reads it, and he really enjoys it. He's intrigued by it. He doesn't buy into it. The reason why is because, and you may not know this, but Muslims believe that the Holy Bible is the authoritative Word of God. Did you know that? They believe without question the Bible is the authoritative Word of God, just not the one you have. You don't have the right one. The one you have is just a bunch of isolated stories piecemealed together. And so Wissam read the Gospel of John and thought, everything I've been taught is right. It's a great story, but it's just one story among many that doesn't make any sense when you put them all together. Until one day he picked up the book of Job at the flea market. And he began reading it, and again, he enjoyed the book of Job. He found a lot of truth in it, but it's just another story, right? And it wasn't long after that that he found the complete New Testament. And he started reading it. And he became convicted. And he realized that it's not a bunch of stories piecemealed together, that it's one common thread throughout. And for 12 years, Wissam searched high and low in Iraq to find someone to baptize him. And no one would. Finally, through correspondence with World Bible School, he found a man in England who agreed to risk life and limb and fly to Baghdad to baptize Wissam. And upon being baptized, Wissam goes home and his mother says to him, not congratulations, I'm so proud of you, but rather she says, what have I ever done to you that you would bring this reproach upon me and your family? Because obviously, living in a Muslim state, it was going to be very difficult for him to function, and it would bring persecution for his family as well. And so, he decides the only thing that he can do is seek asylum in America. He leaves his mother, never to see her again. He comes to the United States, goes through Sunset School of Preaching. They place him with a job in Dearborn, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. because that is the highest concentration of Muslims in the United States. And Wissam is doing a great work there. And I'm working to get Wissam to come here and talk to you and tell his story because it's a beautiful story. But one that shows Matthew 10 in a whole new light. It's easy to read these words and understand, okay, I see what Jesus is saying, but to put it into practice or to live it is something entirely different, right? To know that because you're a follower of Jesus, your family wants nothing to do with you and never wants to see you again, that's something entirely different. Again, you would hope your family would be so proud of you, that they would embrace you, that they would be so happy that you put on Christ, but not always. Jesus was the Prince of Peace. He brought the gospel of peace, and yet people hated Him. They crucified Him. He didn't experience peace. Many people thought that the Messiah would come to bring peace and prosperity. Many people think that following Him today will bring that, but Jesus brought hostility when He came. Jesus brought misery when He came. Jesus brought persecution. To be a disciple in the first century was anything but peaceful at times. And in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is preparing to send out the apostles on a preaching tour to reach the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and He is warning them of the danger. There will be rejection. They will be like sheep in the midst of wolves. The apostles would be opposed by political dignitaries, by Jewish leaders, and even members of their own family. And then notice what it says in verses 21 and 22. It says, "Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. And children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who has endured to the end who will be saved." Discipleship did not necessarily mean peace. In fact, it might mean quite the opposite. But here's something that we have to understand and something that we have to get straight, and that is the sword that Jesus brought was the effect of His coming. It wasn't the purpose. He didn't come to intentionally break up families, to intentionally cause people to be harmed. But that was just the result of people who followed Him. It wasn't His intent to cause upheaval, but it was very much likely to happen because you followed Him. There is always a cost when it comes to unqualified loyalty to Jesus. You know, there was a well-known preacher who was going to preach to a crowd of thousands. And he arrives at the venue with his beautiful fiancée holding her hand. And as he sees the massive crowd of people, he is overwhelmed with a sense of responsibility. Immediately, he gets tunnel vision, realizing that all of these people are there because they're hungry and they want to hear the Word of God. And so he immediately makes his way through the crowd and gets up to the stage so that he can preach the Word to them. But as he's making his way through the crowd, he gets separated from his fiancée. He looks for a bit, but realizes that there's so many people that he'll catch up with her later. And so he gets to the front, he gets on stage, and he preaches one of the best soul-stirring sermons any of the people had ever heard. Many were convicted. Many came forward to be baptized that night. And when it was over, he looks for his fiancée, he can't find her, and he decides she probably went home. And so he goes to her house, he rings the doorbell, and sure enough, she answers. And she is pouting and sulking. She's upset with him. And she says, "You left me there. You didn't even look for me." And he says, "Well, I did look for you. I couldn't find you, but when I see that many people, I feel an overwhelming sense of responsibility to what God has called me to do. I had to go and preach." And he says, let's get this straight from the very beginning. If we're going to get married, you have to know that you are second. You have to know that God and His business is first. Can you accept that? Now, just to let you know, that wasn't me, okay? When you look like this, you don't give ultimatums to people. But what this preacher was trying to get across to his young fiancée was, you're going to have to take a back seat. You're going to have to come second in our relationship. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. It's okay for family relationships to come second. In fact, they should. Because as we've said over and over again, it's only when we love God properly that we can love others properly. It's only when we get the order correct that everything else falls into place. Jesus is speaking here in Matthew 10 about the cost of commitment. He does that throughout the Gospels. We read His words about how no one can serve two masters, how you are to lay up treasures in heaven rather than treasures on earth. And we read things like, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul in the process? And we struggle maybe, but we can see how this is true. We can understand Jesus' words, at least in theory, but in practice it becomes more difficult, especially when we talk about family. I mean, come on. We are to love our family, right? I mean, is Jesus really talking about family when He's talking about the cost of commitment? Because the Bible talks about over and over again how we are to love our spouse. I mean, men are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. Children are to obey their parents. We are to bring up our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. We're to honor and respect our parents. Surely Jesus didn't mean family when He was talking about the cost of commitment. Yes, absolutely He did. And the reason why is because Jesus, in His infinite wisdom, understood something that we all should understand, and that is, when God comes first, nobody else suffers. When God is first, everything else falls into place. Guys, have you ever been in a hurry to get to church or to get to work? You're running late, and so you put on a button-up shirt, and you start with that top button, and you button it all the way down, and you get to the end, you realize, uh-oh, I got off line somewhere. And sometimes you don't even notice it. I see you. You come in here and I have to correct you. And you realize, okay, well, I'm going to have to start all over. And so you unbutton the shirt and you start all over again. Because you can't walk out of the house like that, at least on purpose, right? You look ridiculous. We're talking about, and Jesus is talking about here, top button living. You get that top button right. He's the button, you're the slot. You get those things right from the very beginning, and the buttons that go down will fall into place. Whether it's family, your children, your work, whatever it may be. Get the top button in the right slot and everything else works out. I'm not saying your life will be perfect bliss. You're still going to have some issues at times. There's still going to be problems. But I firmly believe you get God right, you get everything right. But He has to come first. Top button living means that you have to get that first button in the right slot or everything else is going to be off from that point forward. You know, don't you find it interesting that we often present the gospel and Christianity as some magical cure-all? Have you noticed that? I mean, Christians do that, don't they? We talk to people about how blessed their life will be if they become a Christian. When you're studying with someone, admit it, have you ever done that? You're studying the Bible with someone, you say, you need to do this because your life will be so much more, will be so much richer and so much more blessed if you just do this. If you just become a Christian, you won't believe how much better your life will be. And yet, Jesus doesn't do that. You notice that? Jesus doesn't present the gospel that way. He doesn't present discipleship that way. You know, it's almost like we have this recruiting poster that says, be all you can be, and Jesus doesn't do that. Those of you who are in the military or who once were in the military, my guess is when you went to the recruiter and you started to sign up to join the military, that they didn't go into detail about how rigorous it would be. That's just my guess, right? I mean, maybe they did, but I doubt they gave you every detail of what you were about to experience. You kind of gloss over that, right? And you talk about all the benefits. It's got great retirement. You're going to get to see the world, right? But with Christianity, we kind of do the same thing. We talk about being all you can be and just join the Lord's army and everything's going to work out. Everything's going to be better. And Jesus says no. In fact, it's probably going to get worse. Jesus doesn't have some poster that says be all you can be. Jesus says, follow me, and it's going to be very difficult. You're probably going to be persecuted. You might even die. Not exactly what you want to hear when you're thinking about joining a movement, right? But the point of it all is that it will be worth it in the end. In Matthew chapter 10, we see Jesus coaching his disciples through difficult times. He says, "But beware of men, for they will hand you over to the courts and scourge you in their synagogues. And you will even be brought before governors and kings for my sake as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they hand you over, do not worry about how or what you are to say, for it will be given you in that hour what you are to say. For it is not you who speak, but it is the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who has endured to the end who will be saved. But whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next, for truly I say to you, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. But in the midst of all the difficulty, as Jesus is coaching them here, in the midst of all this difficulty, there is encouragement. Jesus tells his apostles this. He says, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. But rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not fear. You are more valuable than many sparrows. Jesus is saying it'll all be worth it in the end. Hang on. You may endure incredible hardship in this life, but if you'll be faithful to the end, it will all be worth it. Those of you who have read the book or maybe saw the movie, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you may remember there comes a point where the children are being told about Aslan, who is symbolic of God. And Aslan is this big, strong, ferocious lion. And as he's being described, the children become frightened, don't they? And they say, oh my, a lion? Is he safe? He says, goodness, no, he's not safe. But he's good. Jesus isn't safe. Following Jesus isn't safe. But he's good. And following him is good. And let me just say this morning. If following Jesus hasn't cost you something, you might want to question whether you're following him at all. Because being a disciple will definitely interfere with your life. And if your discipleship is not interfering with your life, then something's wrong. Maybe you've just compromised. Maybe you're following at a distance. Maybe you're not paying any price. You know, in Little Rock, Arkansas, there's this cemetery called Calvary Cemetery, and for many years there has stood a 14-foot bronze cross at the entrance. And not too many years ago, somebody cut it down and stole it. It's like 14 feet tall. They cut it off at its base, and the assumption was they just chopped it up and sold it off to make some money. It's estimated they probably sold it for about $450 each little piece. But the cross was worth astronomically more than that. The cross was worth well over $50,000 to $100,000. But these folks, these thieves, failed to recognize the true value of the cross. And I'm afraid sometimes we do the same thing. That we don't always realize the value of the cross and thus the cost that's involved with following Jesus. Understand this, the Prince of Peace, Jesus, represents a dividing line. He came to bring division. That was not his intent or his purpose necessarily, but it was the result of following him. Jesus represents a dividing line. Either you follow me or you don't. Either you're all in or you're not. I don't want some of your time, some of your work, some of your money, some of your energy or your effort. I want every bit of it. You are either all in or you're not. We often talk about Jesus came to this world to turn it upside down. No, he came to turn you upside down. And He came to dethrone every illegitimate king in your life. Every illegitimate king that sits on the throne of your heart needs to be dethroned. That's why He came. He represents that dividing line. Are you willing to draw a line in the sand and say, not for anything will I cross this. My full allegiance is to God, to Jesus, and that is it. No illegitimate king is ever going to have rule over my life or over my heart. Following Jesus is good, but it's not safe. If we can help you this morning, let us. If you're not a child of God and you're ready to study with someone, or perhaps you've reached the point that you need to take the next step, you're ready to put him on in baptism, we want to help you. If you need the prayers and support of this church family, we want to pray with you. We want this to be a place where you can come, where you can be welcomed, and where you can learn to be a follower.